Should the Dallas Cowboys sign free agent wide receiver Zay Jones, and what would his role be on the offense? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. And just a real quick shout out to the Dallas Cowboys. Landon and I were trying to come up with some content for the rest of the week, and they never fail to help us out. The Cowboys are meeting with Zay Jones, free agent wide receiver who played with the Bills, the Raiders, and then the Jags last year. That news comes from Jordan Schultz. Just right off the top, Landon, we're going to dive into this, but right off the top, what were your thoughts when you heard this news?
One of our esteemed listeners practically predicted this, if I'm not mistaken. That one of our questions was about whether Zay Jones would be a good fit. I think that, when I saw that he became available, I wondered if the Cowboys would at least kick the tires there, right? Because I do think that if you're looking for a similar situation to what you had with Gallup last season, right, where you're trying to promote Tolbert to kind of take the role of wide receiver 3, right, and then kind of just grab that situation by the horns. But you also would like to have a supplement, right, just in case that he can't reach that
fallback option, right?
Yes, a fallback option, or at the very least, something that if he can't do it by himself, that maybe you could cobble together the wide receiver 3 between him and a veteran, right? And I think Zay Jones kind of fits that very well. And I think he fits the Michael Gallup role of it very well as well, because you look at Zay Jones and he is an X receiver, right? He's a guy that can line up, isolate on the other side, can win against press. Is he elite? Is he a Pro Bowler? Is he, a wide receiver 3 on everyone's depth chart? Absolutely not. But he is a serviceable veteran wide receiver who could come in and run routes for you, who knows how to get open in the against NFL corners, and can produce at a reasonable level. I don't know that I'm trying to feature him in any part of the passing attack or anything like that. And honestly, I think that we've already seen on Twitter a little bit people suggesting that he's coming for Jaylen Tolbert's spot at wide receiver 3. I would tap the brakes on it, man. I mean, I think that the Cowboys really like Jaylen Tolbert a lot, and I think that this is more of a situation where they're trying to, supplement the position to kind of cover themselves, almost like insurance, right? I think he fits in the sense that they were looking for another of those X receiver body types, and I think he fits that perfectly. But as far as a guy that's like, going to come in and shake the whole room up or change the shape of the offense, I think this is more of a guy that can come in and give you some good snaps during a game, as opposed to a real, fundamental shift on how the ball's being redistributed in the offense.
Yeah, I saw a couple of our esteemed beat writers out there saying that he would come in and challenge, that he would come in and replace Jaylen Tolbert as the wide receiver 3 and would challenge Brandon Cooks for the wide receiver 2. No, listen, as somebody who, not bragging here, but as somebody who has got to follow Zay Jones very closely and watch him a lot over the last 4 years, that's not what he is. What he can do is he's got good size, he's got good speed, and he can play all 3 positions. When he was with the Raiders, played a little bit in the slot. They would run a lot of slot fades with him. With the Jags, he played more on the outside. You're getting a guy that can play all 3 receiver spots, that's cheap, and that provides you a little bit of athleticism. Here's the knocks. Over the last 3 years, his yards after catch per reception, 89th out of 97 of qualifying receiver, 3.1. Contested catch percentage, 85th out of 97 receivers. Like, you're getting a guy that doesn't make contested catches very frequently, unless you're playing against the Cowboys on Thanksgiving and you're going up against Anthony Brown, and then a guy that doesn't really make plays after the catch. So he can separate a little bit because he is such a good athlete, but he's not, especially going into his age 29 season, he's not really a dynamic weapon. Having said all of that, Landon, I feel so much better if he is your wide receiver 4 than Jaylen Brooks. Happy birthday to Jaylen Brooks, by the way.
Absolutely. By the way, happy birthday, Jaylen.
Going to replace you with Zay Jones. I think he's a significantly better player. But the issue, it's a numbers thing because, okay, let's say he is the wide receiver 4. Zay Jones has almost no special teams experience. He had one season where he played 100 special team snaps with the Raiders and then basically nothing else since then. Can you afford to have your wide receiver 4 not play special teams?
Well, I think honestly, we may need to kind of reevaluate some of the special team stuff because I think a lot of the angles have changed here because of the kickoff return and the body types that you're going to want to play some of these special teams may have changed. So, you may not be relying on your wide receiver 4 as much to play special teams, but it's still a good question.
But can you keep 6 wide receivers though? Because if you're going to have, let's say, Jaylen Brooks as wide receiver 5 and Kevontae Turpin as your returner, 6 receivers on top of likely 4 tight ends, and then maybe a deeper running back room, like the numbers start to add up pretty quickly here.
Yeah, that is a good question. I do think that you wonder if, again, the way that how the practice squad is going to get leveraged in all this, right? And how much of these how many of these veterans are going to end up on these practice squad. And honestly, like this, with this new kind of format, I wouldn't be shocked if Zay Jones was one of these guys that eventually, got worked onto this. So I do think your point is valid that if you're not going to have special teams guys, and I think that's probably why Jaylen Brooks would have to, if he wants to make the team, be a 6-tool special teams guy, right? He's got to play every single one. So I do think that the Cowboys were able to fit Gallup onto the roster last year.
Yep.
I'm sure they'll figure out a way to do this. But that's only if Zay Jones is worthy of a roster spot.
We should also mention that Jalen Tolbert does have some special teams experience. Like, he's played quite a bit there over the last 2 years. But back to the original point, like, I think this would be a good signing if the Cowboys brought him in, because I do think it would upgrade the wide receiver 4 position pretty significantly. But I also don't think they're bringing him in to replace Jalen Tolbert. I think after the step that he took in year 2, I think the Cowboys really want him to grab that wide receiver 3 spot, and they're going to give him every opportunity. This just gives them a good baseline in case something else were to happen in your wide receiver room. You have a functional NFL receiver on the depth chart that you can plug in if you need it.
Yeah, if anything, this may be Jaylen Brooks insurance, just probably. Because like if Brooks can't take the next step that you wanted to see him take, which would be to be kind of a reliable rotational wide receiver, a guy who can play all the special teams for you. If Brooks doesn't take the next receiving step where you can rely on him if you need him, if Cooks gets hurt for a game and you're going to have to see an uptick of Brooks in the game, is that going to be a detriment to your team? Is he going to be able to function? And if not, how do you fix that? Zay Jones may be a way to fix that, right? Because he can play all 3 spots. He's reliable in that sense. May not be a playmaker, but at least he can run the offense the way you need him to, and he can keep going. So, I do think it doesn't necessarily mark disaster. That's why this isn't really an ironic birthday greeting for Jaylen Brooks. I don't think his days are numbered or anything.
No,
like
I don't think
necessarily. So, but I do think that what it will do is provide a veteran presence in the offensive wide receiver room that you already have with Lamb and Cooks, but another guy who can kind of take those down roster guys underneath his wing, and just give another set of veteran kind of perspective on how the league is and how to succeed as a wide receiver in the league.
All right, let's get to our next question about Deuce Vaughn, and if we have any hope that he can be a factor this year. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and in the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 that that you can use to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Go check out the NBA lines they have up right now. We've got some really fun series now in round 2. The NHL hockey, hockey was unbelievable last night. A lot of really exciting third periods. Plus, we got the NFL win totals out. We've got the player props. We've got awards. So many good things happening at FanDuel right now. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that unnecessary screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Landon, this next question comes from Hunter. He wants to know, I would love to hear y'all's thoughts on Deuce and if you think he can carve out a role on offense. He's always been a massive Deuce Vaughn fan and still believes that he can work out in the NFL.
I just want to point out that I read a really interesting article about Deuce Vaughn on SI.com by a certain Dustin Mosier, who had a lot to say. They had no idea, I'm sure. So you guys go check that out.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I watched a little bit of the was it the now I can't remember. I think it's a Jacksonville preseason game, right? In which
was it Seattle?
Was it Seattle? Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. And just to kind of reassociate myself with what like successful Deuce Vaughn against pro looked like, because I think I'm having a hard time with Deuce Vaughn this offseason. I really don't know what to expect because I feel like what we got from Deuce last year was kind of, for the most part, a physically maxed out version of the player, I wonder where his physicality and his athleticism can go from here. Does he get faster? Does he get quicker? Does he get stronger in a pro weight room? It certainly is possible because of, time and all that, but there is also the idea that Deuce Vaughn, is a maxed out player at 5'5", or in his height. So I'm really struggling to kind of to figure out exactly the floor and the ceiling for Deuce Vaughn at this point. I think that I expected more success out of him when we saw him in the regular season. But I also think that there is some hope in the sense that as the Cowboys kind of revamp this offensive line a little bit, as it seems to be that they are kind of maybe leaning in a little bit more to some man gap and power principles in the run game, that kind of plays into Deuce's abilities a little bit.
Sure.
I think that there is hope for Deuce. I don't know that I would be penciling him in for, the running back 2 or, the alternate guy yet.
Hold on, let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to make you do a 53-man roster prediction right now, is he on it?
I really don't know. Like, honestly, he is probably the player on the Cowboys that I struggle with the most because there is part of me that is concerned that he just isn't big enough to do the job in the NFL on a regular basis. There are times when you see him slip out into a screen and he gets the ball in his hands and it's electric. And you see that, right? There are times when he gets the ball in the backfield on a handoff and he's ducking behind guards and you can tell the linebackers can't see him and that works, right? But I have yet to see Deuce Vaughn truly break a tackle in a regular season NFL game, I feel like. Yeah. And that's the issue, is that if he goes down on every first touch, that he gets in an NFL regular season game, man, you have to be able to break tackles in the NFL to be an effective player. And especially for Deuce, because Deuce is the sales point, the job that he's trying to kind of get is the juice running back, right? Like the guy that's like the guy who's going to break off the long run, who's going to be able to break tackles. And maybe he doesn't need to break tackles by running through arm tackles or, running through guys, but you got to be able to at least get away from tacklers. And
that's my fear is like, even coming out of Kansas State, it's like he has to be that juice running back, but he ran a 4.56 with a 1.59 10-yard split.
Yeah.
That's below average for all NFL running backs. And I, again, running back testing, I care about less than any other position. Like if you play fast, it's not that big of a deal. But when you're that small and you run that time, I am a little concerned. Now, if we do the glass half full, thing for Deuce Vaughn, it's okay. Year 2 into the system.
Yeah.
And you look at the other running backs on the team, it's Ezekiel Elliott, Rico Dowdle, Royce Freeman, and Malik Davis. Like all those guys are like 220-ish pound running backs, right? He's the only guy that's like under 210 pounds, and he's under it by like 50 pounds, right? Like he's the only running back on the roster that has his skill set. So maybe this is, again, if we want to be very optimistic, maybe one of the reasons why the Cowboys didn't go out and get a running back is because they feel really good about the combination of big running back plus Deuce Vaughn. But on the flip side, if you're being a little bit more pessimistic, he had 8 total snaps after week 5 last year. I mean, they essentially benched him. He was a healthy scratch for most of those weeks. Like they were so discouraged that they didn't even play him at all. So I have no idea what to expect.
And what did they like? What was the offseason plan to get him from being benched to being a main part of the running back room? Like what was he supposed to be fast? Was he supposed to be getting faster this offseason? Is that possible?
Unless he added bulk. I don't know.
Well, here's the problem is that it's not that he's too slow or that he's too small. It's both. It's right. Both. And that
be one of the
and that the issue is that he made the margins work in college football, but the margins are too thin at the NFL. And like if you're not quick enough and you're not big enough to break tackles, like my fear before we even saw all of it was that exactly what we saw. Is that it all, is too much and he can't break tackles. He can't get away from tackles. Right. So that's what we saw in a lot of ways, right? Is that you saw him get the ball in space and be able to create that way. But I mean, as soon as a defender closed in on him, the play's over. So, I don't really, that's why I think I'm frustrated or not frustrated, but like confused as to, what the plan is. Like, how do you develop? Is there ceiling to Deuce Vaughn's game? Because I was kind of generally under the impression, when he came in, that he was pretty much who he was, right? And that like he had part of the reason he was in the NFL is because he absolutely maxed out all the gifts that he had been given. And the kind of sad, depressing part of that story, unfortunately, is what happens when you max out all the gifts that you've been given and it's not enough, right? And that's where I'm afraid we are.
Here's a little bit like a sliver of hope. I thought he looked awesome in the preseason last year.
He did.
And again, I know it's the preseason. I'm never going to overreact to the preseason. But then I think early in the season, things were moving really fast for him. And like you could see him overthinking. So maybe the hope is in year 2. It slows down for him a little bit more. He's never going to be a 15, 16 touch player, but could he be a 7 or 8 touch player that gives you a little bit of a juice as a receiver? Maybe. I think that's the hope for me now, is that he's not going to get bigger. He's not going to get stronger. He's not going to get faster. It's just that he comprehends things a little bit quicker than he did last year. And it slows down for him where he can be an average passing down back.
Yeah, I don't think my standard for him is like that he needs to be running through arm tackles or breaking tackles, but I think he needs to be able to counteract he can't be tackled by the first tackler every single time it shows up. So he's got to counteract that with his, like you just mentioned, his vision and his quickness, now that hopefully the game is slowed down a little bit, or a combination of that plus more strength, plus more speed. Like, I don't know what the improvement plan is for Deuce Vaughn, but I feel like it's got to be more than just getting a little bit faster, getting a little bit stronger. Like, you know what I'm saying? He's going to have to kind of do a combination of those things as well as some vision in order for him to get to a point where, you know, the Cowboys have clearly elevated. The Cowboys are, again, we talked about runways, giving folks runways. You feel like Deuce Vaughn, despite all the numbers in the backfield with him, has been given a little bit of a runway because there isn't another kind of juice back in this running back room right now.
All right, let's talk about Trey Lance and what the plan is for Trey Lance this offseason going into the preseason. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. Listen, I know what you're saying. Marcus, you've talked about this all the time, but the reason I'm telling you about it is because there's just so much awesome stuff in this game that we can't fit it all in 60 seconds. We've got to tell you about it every single day in Monopoly Go. You can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more that you win together, the more awesome prizes that you unlock. And there's so much to get, like unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces that you can travel the boards with, and hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings and heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. Plus, a ton of them include their own unique mini games. And there's always something new in the timed events that will help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win and rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now for free on the Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are answering your Twitter questions. And this last one comes from Goran. He wants to know, how should the Cowboys play Trey Lance and Cooper Rush in the preseason? What allows them to get the best answer possible on Lance?
They need to kind of get some exposure on Lance. I mean, we need to see Trey play a lot, you know.
I would have played the entire preseason.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I don't need to see any of Cooper Rush. Like I know
Doc hasn't played preseason in each of the last 2 years, and they've been perfectly fine.
Yeah, and we know what Cooper Rush is. I don't need Cooper to kind of continue to come in here and prove himself to us. Like, but I do need to see Trey Lance. You know, I do need to see what exactly you've got in this kid. And I think that it's, you know, Trey Lance has got a lot going on around him, right? You know, it's not even just his competition at the backup quarterback. It's his competition long-term for the Cowboys starting position. I mean, I know no one wants to talk about that, but that is an element here, is that, you know, the Cowboys want to see if they can develop this guy into a starter one day. And if that is the chance, that gives them leverage over Dak down the road. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow.
Well, it's also showcasing him for teams next offseason if the Cowboys decide not to sign him to a contract extension.
Or for Trey himself, right? Trey's got to show himself off if he wants to get that next contract.
And that's what I mean. Like, right. So, like, if he wants to show other teams, like, hey, remember me when it comes to next free agent cycle.
So there's a lot riding on the Cowboys finding success with Trey Lance or Trey Lance, you know, having some success. So I would imagine that we will get a healthy dose of Trey Lance. I will imagine that he will get a healthy dose of running back. Good Lord, quarterback to the snaps in the training camp, just because.
Well, maybe.
Well, I mean, boy, let's not even go down. Maybe he'll get a whole bunch of quarterback one to snaps.
There you go.
And honestly, maybe he will, regardless of whatever ominous thing that you're hinting at. I think that there is still an opportunity for him to get lots of chances to work with the first team, simply because you want to see how he responds to that and how he's taking to the offense. There are many different tracks available to Trey Lance at this point, you know, and for the Cowboys, he's viewed as an asset, as a quarterback who could play on the team. So I think you're going to see a ton of Trey Lance. And if he does well, then I think, you know, that opens up a whole another interesting conversation. If the Dak deal gets done before the season, because if it doesn't and Trey Lance does well, then you're going to start to have a very interesting offseason or really an interesting regular season, and kind of trying to decide how to handle that situation. So I think the first step though is getting Trey Lance opportunities and seeing how he does with them.
Yeah.
And then kind of making an evaluation from there. But I would say if you're looking for a spectrum of where Trey Lance could be, I could see him being cut before the. I think I'd have a hard time believing that he would be cut before the season.
Borderline cut. We'll say borderline.
I could see him not being part of the picture by the time regular season starts. I could see him doing so well that it becomes a regular season conversation of the constant quarterback controversy that Cowboys have whenever they have a decent backup quarterback, right? That is Trey, looking over Dak's shoulder. So I think there's a huge wide range of spectrum of things that can happen, but it all starts with getting exposure and seeing exactly what we have in Trey Lance after investing all this time and resources into him so far.
I want you to guess without looking. How many passes do you think Trey Lance has thrown since 2018? So this is over the last 6 years.
Just 200? 200?
A little bit more than that. 420 actually.
Okay. Oh, that's right, because he did play a lot of games for San Francisco. Yeah.
Three seasons in college, right? 3 seasons in college, 3 with the 49ers, or actually 2 with the 49ers, and this will be his second year with the Cowboys. He needs to play a lot. Again, Dak did not play at all in the preseason. He came out firing last year. They scored 40 points in the opener. Like it's pretty clear. Like the 2021 Dak didn't play in the preseason either. Remember, he was rehabbing the shoulder.
It was rehabbing, and he still came out and fired.
Lights out. It's okay. I don't need Dak playing at all in the preseason. I remember last year with Will Grier, that final game, the final preseason game, threw like 50 passes. That's what it needs to be for Trey Lance in all 3 preseason games. Like we need to see him throw 100-ish passes in the preseason just because he needs the rep. And if you want him to play with the first team and then kind of transition into playing with the backups the rest of the way, I get that as well. He needs a lot of reps. I'll be kind of upset if I see any other quarterback but Trey Lance get snaps under center this year.
I mean,
in the preseason, let me qualify.
Yeah, wow, that's a good little qualifier there. I will say that I think that if there were a way to kind of assure Cooper Rush, hey buddy, why don't you just go take a seat over there? You're on the team, buddy. We're a fan of yours.
He could be fine with that. Like he gets enough reps in practice. He does not need the preseason reps. And plus, I got to believe after some of the offensive lines they put him behind in the preseason over the last couple of years, he'd be like, oh, great. I get to make the team and not play behind this crappy offensive line. Sign me up.
Trey's got the legs to get away from some of that stuff. Let Trey go run around on the field a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, it is unfortunate because, you said it. Trey definitely just needs all the reps that he can handle, all the reps that he can get. And, that's why the talk about the Cowboys drafting another quarterback this year, I was like, are you crazy? We can't even possibly get enough reps for Trey Lance, and you're about adding another quarterback in here. So I think they got to figure out a way to even give, Rush an opportunity to kind of sit down a little bit and just give Trey as many of these reps as possible, because it's not even just exposure. It's learning on the job. He needs to develop still and developing in, going through drills and sitting in a film room and talking to your quarterback coach. That's all great, but there is nothing compared to, even with all the virtual reality stuff they have, there is nothing compared to getting out there and playing with live bullets and seeing how you react under pressure and all of that, and getting the reps so it becomes second nature, especially a quarterback. So, it's going to be one of the interesting storylines is going to be exactly how do the Cowboys get Trey Lance all the snaps that he's going to require this offseason, and I'm excited to see how that plays out.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We post videos every single day over there. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcast. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. And we will see you right back here tomorrow.